It was one of those warm Saturday afternoons when the community gym seemed to come alive with energy. The sound of sneakers squeaking on the floor mixed with the sharp thud of punches hitting pads. People were chatting, stretching, and showing off little moves they'd been practicing all week. It wasn't a competition day, just an open training session where anyone could join in, watch, or spar for fun. In the middle of all that energy stood a man everyone in the gym seemed to know. He was tall, athletic, and carried himself with that kind of confidence that comes from years of training. He was a black belt and people respected his skill, but he was also known for his playful nature. He loved to challenge others to friendly matches, often saying it helped everyone improve. That day, after a few light rounds with his usual sparring partners, he looked around for someone new. His eyes landed on a woman standing near the side of the mats. She wasn't dressed in a uniform, just gym clothes and sneakers. She had been quietly watching, occasionally smiling when someone landed a good move or showed great footwork. She didn't look nervous or out of place, just calm and observant. The man grinned and called out to her, half joking, "Hey, want to spar a little? Just for fun." A few people laughed. It was the kind of moment that happened often in the gym. Someone teasingly challenging someone else. But this time there was something different about it. The woman looked at him for a second, then smiled politely. "Sure," she said, her voice soft but steady. The laughter around them faded a bit. Nobody expected her to say yes. Even the man raised an eyebrow, surprised but amused. "Really? You sure?" he asked. She nodded. "Why not? It's just for fun, right?" The instructor, who was keeping an eye on everyone, stepped closer. "Keep it light," he reminded them. "Just a friendly round." They both agreed. The man grabbed a pair of gloves for her and handed them over. She slipped them on easily, not fumbling or struggling like someone new to it. That caught his attention. He noticed how naturally she adjusted her stance as she stepped onto the mat. A small crowd began to gather, not because anyone expected a serious fight, but because they were curious. It was rare to see someone new step up so calmly to spar with one of the gym's best. The man smiled and took his usual position. He wasn't trying to show off, but a part of him assumed it would be an easy match. He planned to move lightly, keep it playful, and maybe offer her a few friendly tips along the way. The woman took a steady breath and raised her hands. Her expression didn't change. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She just looked ready. When the instructor called start, the man moved first. He threw a light jab, not to hit but to test her reflexes. She didn't flinch or panic. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, letting his punch pass by harmlessly. Her movement was small, quick, and smooth, like it was second nature. The man chuckled quietly. "Nice," he said. He tried another jab, this time a bit faster. Again, she slipped out of range effortlessly. People started noticing. A few whispers rippled through the group watching. She didn't strike back right away. She just studied him, her eyes focused and calm. Then, when he tried to close the distance again, she stepped in and tapped him lightly on the chest with a quick, clean counter. It wasn't hard or aggressive, it was just precise. That one touch changed the mood. The man blinked, surprised, and then smiled wider. "All right," he said, half laughing. "You've done this before." She shrugged lightly. "A little," she said. The crowd laughed softly, but their attention sharpened. Something interesting was happening. What started as a casual, playful challenge was beginning to feel different. The man began to move more seriously, not in a harsh way, but with more focus. He threw a few combinations, testing her movement. She responded each time with poise, stepping in and out, blocking where needed, never looking panicked. Her breathing stayed even, her posture balanced. He realized he couldn't read her style. She wasn't moving like a taekwondo fighter or a boxer or a kickboxer. Her rhythm was different, more grounded, almost like she was blending different techniques together. "Where'd you learn to move like that?" he asked between exchanges. She smiled but didn't answer right away. She sidestepped another strike and simply said, "Long story." By now, even the instructor was watching closely. He'd seen hundreds of people train, but the way this woman carried herself was unusual. There was a quiet confidence in her movements, the kind that comes from deep practice, not just physical training, but understanding. The man decided to pick up the pace a little, still keeping it safe. He wanted to see what she could really do. He threw a light kick, aiming for her side. She caught the timing perfectly, stepping just far enough to avoid it, then gently tapping his leg on the return, a small reminder that she saw it coming. The crowd reacted with a few surprised sounds. Nobody expected her to read him that easily. "Okay," he said with a grin. "You're good," she simply smiled again. "I try." There was no arrogance in her tone, no need to prove anything. That calmness only made her presence stronger. Minutes passed, and the spar continued in a rhythm that everyone found mesmerizing. They weren't fighting. They were communicating through movement. The man tested, she responded. She tested, he adjusted. Both were learning from each other without words. The more they moved, the clearer it became that this wasn't just about skill, it was about attitude. He had entered thinking it would be a light, fun challenge. But now he was reminded of something deeper. Real martial arts isn't about showing off or proving strength. It's about respect, awareness, and control. After several minutes, the instructor called for a pause. Both of them stepped back, breathing but not exhausted. The crowd clapped softly, still surprised by what they'd seen. The man took off his gloves and smiled genuinely this time. "That was great," he said. "You've definitely trained before?" She nodded politely. "Yeah, a bit here and there," she replied, wiping a bit of sweat from her forehead. He wanted to ask more, but something in her calm expression told him she wasn't the type to brag or talk about herself much. She seemed content to let the experience speak for itself. As they walked off the mat, the crowd started buzzing with conversation. People were curious. Who was she? Where did she train? How did she move so well without anyone knowing about her? But the woman didn't seem to notice the attention. She found a spot near the side of the gym, sat down, and took a sip of water, quietly watching the next pair step up to spar. The man joined his friends, still shaking his head in disbelief. "I thought she was new," he said, laughing. "I guess I was the one who got schooled today." Everyone laughed, but there was respect in their tone. Nobody mocked or teased. They all knew they had just seen something rare, a moment that reminded them what true skill and humility look like. For the rest of the day, the energy in the gym felt different. People were inspired. They practiced harder, paid more attention, and treated each other with a little more respect. Even the man who had issued the playful challenge found himself thinking differently. He realized that sometimes confidence can make you blind to what others are capable of. He had looked at her and assumed she was just an observer, someone who didn't know much about martial arts. But she had moved with grace, control, and awareness that only comes from deep experience. It wasn't just about technique. It was about mindset. She had shown that being calm, patient, and centered could outmatch someone faster or stronger. When the session ended, the man caught up to her near the exit. "Hey," he said with a friendly smile. "Thanks for sparring with me today. You really made me think." She returned the smile. "No problem. It was fun. Are you coming back next week?" He asked. "Maybe," she said, "if I have time." And just like that, she left. No big goodbye, no attention-seeking moment. Just quiet dignity. The next day, people were still talking about her. Nobody knew her name, but everyone remembered the way she moved. Some called her the quiet fighter. Others said she reminded them why they fell in love with martial arts in the first place. What started as a lighthearted challenge had turned into a story everyone in that gym would remember, not because of who won or lost, but because of what it revealed about respect, skill, and humility. And for the man who had issued the challenge, it was the beginning of a lesson that would stay with him for a long time, one that he hadn't expected to learn on an ordinary Saturday afternoon. The next weekend came faster than anyone expected. The community gym was buzzing again, filled with the usual rhythm of conversations, sneakers sliding across the mats and gloves thudding against pads. But this time the energy was different. People were still talking about the quiet woman who had surprised everyone during last week's sparring session. No one had seen her since that day. Some thought maybe she wouldn't come back. Others kept glancing at the entrance, wondering if she'd walk in again. Even the black belt who had sparred with her couldn't stop thinking about that round. It wasn't that she had outperformed him in a flashy way. She had just moved with a calm confidence that stayed in his mind all week. When she finally walked through the gym doors, a few people noticed immediately. She was dressed the same way, simple workout clothes, nothing to draw attention. She gave a polite smile to the instructor and quietly found a space to stretch. The conversations around the room seemed to lower for a moment before returning to normal. The man who had sparred with her last week was across the mat, working on drills with a group of students. When he noticed her, he smiled, a little surprised. He walked over after his round ended, wiping sweat from his face. "Hey," he said in a friendly tone. "You came back," she nodded. "Yeah, thought I'd train a bit more." "Good," he replied. "Everyone's been talking about that spar." She laughed softly. "Oh no, really? It wasn't that big of a deal." He shook his head. "You'd be surprised. You made an impression." The instructor called everyone to gather near the center. "All right, we'll do some light partner drills before sparring rounds," he said. "Focus on timing, not power." They paired up, and as luck would have it, the instructor matched the same two together again. The crowd exchanged curious looks. Everyone remembered what had happened last time, and no one wanted to miss what might happen next. This time, there was no joking challenge. No teasing. Just quiet respect between two people who both wanted to train and learn. They began with simple movement drills, light strikes, defensive steps, and balance exercises. The man tried not to overthink it, but every time she moved, he noticed something different. Her steps were precise, her eyes always aware, and she had this way of reading his body before he even made a move. "You have good timing," he said as they paused to reset. She smiled modestly. "Thanks, I just try to stay relaxed. Makes it easier to see what's coming." He nodded, realizing that was something he still struggled with. He tended to tense up when focusing too hard. Watching her move reminded him that martial arts was as much about mental calmness as it was about physical skill. When it came time for open sparring again, a small circle formed around the mat. The instructor didn't plan for it, but everyone naturally wanted to watch. They faced each other again, both smiling lightly. There was no sense of rivalry, just mutual curiosity. The instructor gave the signal and they began. The first few moments were quiet, with both moving carefully, feeling out the rhythm. She waited patiently, not rushing forward, not showing any nerves. The man tried a few light combinations, but she matched his timing, staying one step ahead. It was clear she wasn't trying to dominate. She was matching his energy perfectly, like she understood how to keep everything balanced. That kind of control was rare. Most people either went too hard or too soft, but she had found the perfect middle ground. As they moved, something interesting happened. The rest of the gym went quiet again, just like the week before. Everyone's attention slowly drifted toward them, drawn in not by force or aggression, but by the calm rhythm of their movements. He tried switching tactics, mixing in a few feints. She didn't fall for any of them. Instead, she used small shifts in her stance to create space or close distance, never wasting energy. Then came a moment that made everyone lean forward. He threw a light jab, followed by a quick step to the side, a combination that usually worked well for him. But she anticipated it. With a smooth motion, she moved into position and tapped his shoulder with a perfectly timed counter. It was so quick and subtle that half the people watching almost missed it. He stopped and laughed, shaking his head. "You're really something," he said between breaths. She gave a small shrug. Just paying attention. They continued, each round more fluid than the last. He began to relax, enjoying the rhythm of it. There was no ego, no sense of winning or losing, just movement, respect, and learning. When the instructor finally called time, the two stepped back and bowed to each other out of respect. The small crowd that had gathered clapped lightly, not because someone won, but because it was beautiful to watch. As they took off their gloves, the man said quietly, "You know, last week I thought I was just giving someone a light challenge. Turns out you were the one teaching me." She smiled, amused. "That's the good thing about sparring," she said. "You always learn something new, no matter who you're with." Afterward, they sat on the side benches, sipping water and chatting more comfortably. He asked how long she'd been training. "On and off for years," she said. "Different styles. I like learning from all of them." "Which one's your favorite?" he asked. She thought for a moment. "Probably the one that teaches you how to stay calm," she said. "Doesn't matter what technique you use if your mind's not steady." That answer stuck with him. It was something his instructor had tried to teach him for years, but hearing it from her, someone who embodied it naturally, made it hit differently. The instructor walked by and smiled. "You two make a good match," he said. "You both bring out the best in each other." The man nodded. "Yeah, I think I needed that." The rest of the afternoon went on with others sparring and training, but that quiet exchange stayed in everyone's mind. Some of the younger students started mimicking her balanced stance or calm breathing, trying to capture that same poise she had shown. Later, as people were packing up, a few members approached her asking for tips. She didn't act like an expert. She just shared simple advice: don't rush, breathe evenly, watch their shoulders, not their hands. Her explanations were easy to understand, and she always spoke with patience. The man watched from a distance, realizing that respect doesn't have to be demanded. Sometimes it's just earned quietly, through the way a person carries themselves. When the gym finally emptied out, he caught up to her again. "You know," he said, "I think you've changed how a lot of people here see training." She smiled lightly. "That's good. It's supposed to bring people together, not make them compete all the time." He nodded. "You're right. I think we all forget that sometimes." They walked out together toward the parking lot, chatting about random things: food, training routines, weekend plans. There was no tension, just an easy sense of friendship that came from mutual respect. Before leaving, he said, "If you ever want to run drills together outside of class, let me know." "Sure," she said. "That could be fun." Then she waved goodbye and headed to her car, disappearing into the soft glow of the evening sun. Inside the gym, the instructor smiled to himself. He had seen hundreds of students over the years, some talented, some driven, some overconfident. But every once in a while someone came along who reminded everyone why they trained in the first place. That night, the man went home and replayed the sparring sessions in his mind. He realized that strength wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was quiet, measured, and patient. He thought about how many times he had gone into matches thinking he had the upper hand, only to miss the chance to really learn. He understood now that true martial arts wasn't about showing who was better. It was about connecting, listening, and learning from others. The woman had shown him that without saying much at all, and though she didn't know it, her calm presence had changed the way the whole gym trained from that day forward. People moved with more awareness. They focused on control, not power. They encouraged each other instead of trying to outdo one another. It was a small shift, but an important one. The next time she walked into that gym, she wouldn't just be the quiet woman who surprised everyone. She'd be the one who reminded them all what real strength looks like: steady, patient, and humble, each other on. Yet every time the quiet woman walked in, the energy changed a little. It wasn't because she was loud or tried to draw attention. It was because of how she carried herself, calm, focused, and respectful. Her presence had become a kind of reminder for everyone to stay grounded. The man who had first sparred with her had grown to admire that calmness. Every session he tried to be more mindful, to move with patience instead of pride. The instructor noticed the change too. "You've been slowing down your movements lately," he said one day with a smile. "That's a good thing." "You're thinking more," the man nodded. "Yeah, I guess I'm learning to pay attention to the small details." The instructor chuckled. That's where real progress begins. On that particular Saturday, the gym decided to host an informal sparring showcase. It wasn't a competition, just a day where members could demonstrate their growth and challenge themselves a bit in front of others. The idea was to build confidence and community. The instructor explained, "You can choose your partners. Keep it safe, but push yourselves a little. It's about testing your control and awareness." The man looked around. Several students were already pairing up. Then he noticed her in the corner, wrapping her hands quietly. He walked over, smiling. "You up for another round?" he asked. She looked up, smiled back, and said, "Sure, why not?" When they stepped onto the mat, everyone took notice again. Not because they expected a big fight, but because their sparring sessions had become something special to watch, full of rhythm, respect, and flow. Even the newer members gathered closer, eager to see how much they had both improved. They bowed to each other, adjusted their gloves, and took their stances. The instructor gave the signal to begin. The first few exchanges were light, smooth, almost like a dance. They had developed a rhythm together, a kind of silent understanding. The man tested her defense with quick jabs and low kicks, but she read them effortlessly, staying composed. When she countered, her movements were clean and controlled. Everyone watching could tell how much they had both grown since the first time they sparred. The man no longer underestimated her. Instead, he was focused, trying to match her timing and precision. At one point, he tried a quick pivot to the side, hoping to catch her off guard. She reacted instantly, spinning just enough to stay aligned and tapping his shoulder gently before stepping back. It was fast, graceful, and completely under control. The crowd murmured in awe. He smiled, breathing heavier now. "You don't make it easy," he said. She grinned. "You wouldn't want it to be easy," the match continued. The sound of their steps echoed softly across the mat. Light, measured, steady. Neither of them seemed to be chasing a win. They were simply moving in sync, pushing each other to their limits without crossing the line. Then came a moment that surprised everyone. As the man moved in for a combination, he lost his footing slightly. It was small, just a slip of balance, but before he could stumble, she stepped forward and steadied him with her hand. He regained his stance, nodded, and they both laughed quietly. The crowd chuckled too. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes. She wasn't there to embarrass or overpower him. She was there to share the experience, to make sure they both learned and improved safely. When the round ended, the instructor clapped his hands. "That," he said, smiling broadly, "is what real sparring looks like. Respect, control, awareness. Excellent." Everyone applauded. Not in a competitive way, but with genuine appreciation. They had just watched something that felt real, human, and inspiring. After they stepped off the mat, several students gathered around asking questions. One of the younger ones said, "How do you stay so calm when someone's trying to hit you?" The woman smiled. "I don't focus on what they're doing. I focus on my breathing. When you're calm, you can see everything clearly." Another student asked, "What if you get nervous?" She nodded thoughtfully. "That's normal. Everyone gets nervous. But instead of fighting the feeling, just let it be there. It passes once you start moving." Her words were simple, but everyone could feel their depth. The instructor listened too, clearly proud of how she was influencing the group without even trying. The man stood nearby, watching how the others listened to her. He realized she had become something of a quiet mentor to everyone in the gym. Not through authority or experience, but through presence and authenticity. Later that day, after the showcase ended, most of the crowd went home. Only a few stayed behind to clean up and stretch. The man and the woman found themselves sitting on the edge of the mat, watching the sunset through the big windows. "It's funny," he said after a moment of silence. "When I first asked you to spar, I thought it was just a friendly match. I didn't think it would change how I train." She looked at him with a small smile. "How so?" "I used to think sparring was about proving myself," he said honestly. "Now I see it's more about understanding myself and the person in front of me." She nodded. "That's what it's really about. When you stop trying to win, you start learning faster." He laughed softly. "Yeah, took me a while to get that." They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, listening to the faint sounds of people packing up their gear. The air in the gym felt peaceful, warm with the fading light of the evening. Then she spoke again. "You know, when you spar with someone, it's not just physical. You get to know a lot about them, how they think, how they handle pressure, how they move. It's like a conversation without words." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, and you're really good at that kind of conversation." She chuckled. "Maybe because I like to listen more than talk." The instructor walked by and smiled at them. "You two planning to stay here all night?" he teased. They both laughed. "Just reflecting," the man said. "Good," the instructor replied. "That's part of training too. Reflection keeps you humble." As the last few people left, the instructor added, "You know, I've been teaching for years, but seeing how you two spar reminds me why I started. It's not about belts or trophies. It's about growth." The man and woman exchanged a knowing look. They both understood exactly what he meant. When they finally left the gym, the night air felt cool and refreshing. The street was quiet except for a few passing cars. They walked together for a short distance before parting ways at the parking lot. "Same time next week?" he asked. She nodded. "Wouldn't miss it." Over the next few weeks, their training sessions became something everyone looked forward to. Even people who weren't scheduled to train would come by just to watch them spar. It wasn't flashy or competitive, but it was inspiring. Their respect for each other, their quiet communication through movement, reminded everyone what true martial arts was about. One evening, after a long session, the instructor decided to record their sparring for the gym's learning archive. He explained that he wanted to show future students how to spar safely and respectfully. They agreed, a little shy about being recorded but happy to contribute. When the session started, they moved naturally, forgetting about the camera. Their flow was smooth, precise, almost meditative. The instructor later said it was one of the best demonstrations of control he'd ever seen. Afterward, when they watched the recording together, the man noticed something he hadn't before. The way she always kept perfect distance. How she anticipated every move without rushing. How her breathing never broke rhythm. "You make it look easy," he said. She smiled. "It's not easy. It's just practice." "A lot of practice," he nodded. "Yeah, but it's more than that. You move like someone who trusts themselves completely." She thought for a moment. Maybe that's it. You can't really control a spar if you don't trust yourself first. Her words lingered in the air, simple yet powerful. By the end of that evening, the instructor uploaded the video privately for the gym's members to study. It quickly became a favorite among students, not for the techniques, but for the feeling behind it, the quiet respect, patience, and focus. It became known as the spar that taught everyone a lesson. And though neither of them sought recognition, both knew something special had happened. Their sparring had turned into something more meaningful, a lesson not just in martial arts, but in how people connect when they let go of pride and move with respect. As they left the gym that night, the man turned to her and said softly, "You know, I think you've taught this whole place something without even trying." She smiled modestly. "I'm just here to learn, same as everyone else." But deep down they both knew it was more than that. What had started as a simple spar for fun had grown into something much bigger. A quiet story about respect, balance, and the kind of strength that doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. Over time, the quiet woman became a familiar face at the gym. She never talked much, but everyone knew her. Whenever she walked in, the atmosphere seemed to calm down. Even the loudest members lowered their voices slightly when she was around. Not because she demanded respect, but because she carried it naturally. The black belt had become one of her closest training partners. Week after week they sparred together, practiced drills, and sometimes just sat on the edge of the mats talking about life, discipline, and patience. Their bond wasn't about competition anymore. It had turned into something deeper, a mutual understanding built through trust and shared effort. One afternoon, the gym was busier than usual. It was a special open training day where visitors could come watch or try out different classes. Families, friends, and even a few local fitness enthusiasts had shown up. There was laughter, conversations, and a sense of excitement everywhere. The instructor wanted to end the day with a few demonstration matches. "Let's show our guests what real control and skill look like," he said with a grin. No showing off, just clean technique and respect. When it was time to choose who would spar, most of the members immediately looked toward the woman in the black belt. Their sparring sessions had become a quiet legend inside the gym. Everyone admired the way they moved together, like two people having a wordless conversation. The instructor called their names, and the crowd broke into light applause. They both smiled modestly, stepped forward, and bowed. It wasn't a show for them. It was just another chance to train, but now with more eyes watching. They began their warm-up, shaking their arms loose, rolling their shoulders, and taking slow, deep breaths. The energy in the room shifted. The chatter quieted as people leaned in, curious to see what would unfold. When the instructor gave the signal to start, they both took their stances. There was a brief silence, and then they moved. It started slow, deliberate. The man advanced lightly, testing her reactions. She moved smoothly, always one step ahead, blocking and countering with grace. There was no rush, no harshness, just flow. Every motion looked effortless. The visitors who didn't know much about martial arts could still sense that what they were seeing was special. It wasn't about aggression or strength, it was about control, awareness, and balance. At one point, he threw a quick combination, faster than usual, and she met it perfectly, pivoting her body with precision and tapping his side before stepping back. The timing was beautiful, and the crowd couldn't help but react with a soft cheer. He smiled, shaking his head in amusement. "You read me too easily," he said quietly. She grinned. "You're just predictable." Their light teasing made the atmosphere even warmer. It wasn't about beating each other. It was about bringing out the best in one another. As the match went on, something became clear even to the beginners watching. This was not about power. It was about partnership. Each move was a reflection of mutual trust. He knew she wouldn't hurt him. She knew he would give her a fair challenge. When the instructor called for a short break, the room filled with applause. Even the children clapped, their eyes wide with admiration. A few whispered things like, "They move like in movies." During the break, the instructor smiled proudly. "That's what years of respect and patience look like," he said to the group. "You can't fake that kind of balance." The black belt and the woman smiled at each other, both a little tired but happy. "Want to keep going?" he asked softly. She nodded. "Let's give them one more round." When they started again, the movements grew even smoother. It felt less like a sparring match and more like a dance, each reacting perfectly to the other. The audience watched in quiet awe. Even the visitors who had no idea about martial arts could sense that something meaningful was happening. Then, in one quick moment, the man tried a new move he had been practicing. It was risky, something he hadn't mastered yet. His footwork was slightly off, and he lost balance for a split second. The woman reacted instantly, catching his arm to steady him before he could fall. The crowd gasped softly, but within seconds he was upright again. They both laughed lightly, and he said under his breath, "Guess I still have work to do." She smiled. "That's what training's for." The crowd clapped again, impressed not by the mistake, but by the respect and teamwork they had shown. When the final bell rang, they bowed to each other and to the audience. Everyone applauded, not because of who was stronger or faster, but because of what they had witnessed: true martial arts spirit. After the session, several visitors came up to thank them for the demonstration. One older man who had brought his teenage daughter to watch said, "That was the first time I've seen a sparring match that felt peaceful and powerful at the same time." The woman smiled politely. "That's what it should be. It's not about fighting. It's about connection." Later that evening, after everyone left, the gym was quiet again. The mats were empty except for the two of them, sitting on the edge, cooling down. The man leaned back, looking at the ceiling. "You know," he said softly, "I think that's the first time I've ever felt proud of a sparring session, even with mistakes." She looked at him curiously. "Why's that?" "Because it wasn't about winning," he said. "It just felt real." She nodded slowly. "That's the best kind of training. The one that teaches you about yourself." For a moment they sat in silence. The lights above flickered slightly, and the faint hum of the air conditioning filled the room. The smell of the mats, the sound of gloves hitting earlier in the day, it all blended into a peaceful memory. "You've changed the way this whole place trains," he said quietly. "People are calmer now, more focused. Even I've stopped rushing my moves." She gave a small smile. "I didn't do anything special. I just tried to be present." "Yeah," he said, smiling. "That's what's special." Over the next few weeks, their sparring sessions became a regular part of the gym's routine. The instructor even started using them as an example for new students. He would say things like, "Watch how they move. That's what patience looks like. That's what real skill means." People started to look at martial arts differently. It wasn't just about strength anymore. It was about learning to stay calm under pressure, to respect your partner, to grow through every mistake. One day after training, a new student approached the woman. "I'm not very strong," the student said shyly. "Do you think I could ever be good at this?" The woman smiled gently. "You don't need to be strong. You just need to be consistent. The rest comes naturally."